Begin the current Daf Mesechtes Bava Kama Daf Samach Zayin. Begin 5 lines down at the top of the Yomid. Now, how do we get over here? Where the Gemara is about to discuss what's called Shinu Hashem She'enu Chayzer L'Briyasai. The way we got over here, that we're at this Daf, is because on the previous Daf, Daf Samach Vav, Rabba, that's where we started the Daf, middle of a little bit. Midway through the daf, Rabbi said Shinu is koina. That's written in the Torah. That's written in the Mishnah. But Yiyush, he said, I'm not sure if that's Teiraisa Drabanan. Rabbi Yosef said, no, Yiyush is not koina even Drabanan. Now, why was Rabbi talking about Shinu koina? That's Teiraisa, and Yiyush he's not sure about, because on the previous daf on Samachem Beis, the first of the wide lines, the below had said halacha that related back to halacha of our Mishnah of Dal V'Hei. This parak is called Meruba. Meruba, why is it called Meruba? He said that there's one thing that Dal V'Hei has, that Kefil has more than Dal V'Hei, which is that it's going to apply to Davar Sheish Baruch Chaim or doesn't have Baruch Chaim. Whereas Dal V'Hei is only by a sheep and an ox. Now, Rabbi Lo had said halacha, if you steal a lamb and it becomes a ram or a calf and it becomes an ox, so nasa shina b'yadoi, so it creates a change. It's not the same thing it always was, and you're koine it. Now, when you're tavach machar, shaloy tavach shaloy meicher, you're not going to be chayiv for tvich mechira because it's yours. It's not anymore the one that you stole it from, not the victims. So that you're not going to be liable. That's obviously built on the premise that there's a shinoi that's going to be koina. That's why we had Rabbah saying Shinu is going to be koina, that's the Raisa. But Yiyush, just if the guy gives up hope, that I wasn't sure, says Rabbah, but the Raisa Rabban. And Rav says, no, actually Yiyush, just the guy giving up hope, is not a kinyan for the guy who stole it, even rabbinically. So that's where we're in the middle of this conversation with the opinion of Rav Yosef, which actually in the few lines we're going to ask, continue to ask on Rav Yosef, who holds Yiyush is not koina at all. But the Gemara in the discussion came up, which Rabbi Yosef had a question that was asked, and for 22 years he didn't have an answer until he became Rosh Hashiva, and then he gave an answer. And he said that it's not just, he describes that Shina Hashem is Kashina Maisa Dami. That Shina Maisa, what's the reason why you're Kaina, is because before it was one thing, now it's something else. Shina Hashem is also the same thing. Then the Gemara says, we find other places like a Marish that it's not going to be considered as a shinoi. So he said, because Shina Hashem, that's Chayzer L'Briyasai, is not a shinoi. If all it is a change in name, but it's something that can be undone and go back to what originally was called, like a beam, so then that's not going to be considered as a shinoi. That was one of the answers the Gemara gave. That's how Gemara is going to continue. It says, okay, but if it's not Chayzer L'Briyasai, it cannot be undone, then it is a shinoi, and that's how Gemara is going to continue on that theme. And again, just to get some context of how do we get over here in this conversation. Hashem corresponds to Pakazak and Cheskel, turned to Bava Kama Daf, turned to today's Daf, Shbeis B'nei Yisrael, and Yisrael throughout the entire world. So discussing today's Daf are the concept of Yiyush Koine. If the owner gave up hope, does that automatically make a kinyan for the Ganav that now it's his? Shina Hashem, the change of the name of the Naidim, is that considered as a valid shinoi to say that, okay, it's not the original thing and now it's yours, the one who stole it? Ma'im Shuv and Paisel, parenthetically, the Gemara brings in the discussion regarding mikvah, the drawn waters invalidates the 3 lugin. If it wasn't the full mikvah yet, will invalidate the mikvah. Now it depends. We know that pipes, and this is what they're very careful when they're building mikvahs, you can't have pipes because that is going to be shu'uvim, it's going to be drawn waters. So there's a differentiation between tziner, a pipe, shachakuku, if it was first carved out of the same but then it was established into the ground, that's going to be placed as a mikvah. That's going to invalidate the mikvah because that was a receptacle, it's a vessel, and thus the water that's flowing into the mikvah is invalid. However, if you first put a flat item that doesn't have a receptacle, and then in the ground, after you established in the ground, you went and you carved it out, then in the place as a mikvah, that's not going to invalidate the mikvah, and the Gemara is going to discuss why, in the context of, as we're discussing here, Shina Hashem, essentially it becomes a kli. Who cares when it became a kli? The halacha that midas tashlumi abava chamisha, as we said in the Mishnah, is in Hekes el B'Shar V'Seh, only applies to an ox and a sheep, and we're discussing the source of that halacha. To begin the current daf, first, as we said on the previous daf, we had mentioned the machlekes Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi said yish is kaina. The ganav does acquire the object through yish, but it was uncertain if yish is kaina is midiraisa or only midrabanan. Rabbi Yosef said no, yish is kaina. The ganav does not acquire the object through yish when the owner gives a pope, even midrabanan. However, Rabbi Yosef agrees if there was yish and shina Hashem, then the ganav does acquire the object. That was the answer he gave after 22 years. That then he does acquire it. Now, the Gemara had asked, it says, but Valamarish Hagazal Shabban the Bebira, we learned that Aloche Sheyitlas Dama, what happens if a person stole a beam and he built it into his house, and then he wants to do tshuva? So Chum initiated, it's sufficient for him to, this is the last thing we learned in the previous stuff, it's sufficient for him to compensate the owner for its value, and he's not required to return the actual beam. Because of the Hashem, because or else the guy's not going to do tshuva. I'm going to rip up my whole house, my $3.2 million house. So time the takan sashavim, halav hachi hadabeene. Right? If not for the takana, he would need to return the actual beam, even though there was a shin Hashem, and that to be kavod keshura b'hashtat lala. So I thought you told me you're kind of with already a shin Hashem. So there was two answers the Gemara gave. Either Rabbi Yisrael said Malav Shmayalav. Actually, there's no shin Hashem because even after it's built in, it's still known as a beam, as the Bryce explains. The pasuk, even in the building, it's still called a marish. Rabbi Zera said, and this is the one that we're going on after now in today's daf. He said, "Shin Hashem achizle biyas lebashina." A shin Hashem that can be reversed is not considered shina, and the beam can be removed from the house as it is. So even though it has a new name when it's in the building, the moment you take it out of the building, it has the old name of beam on it. So since even though it's a shin Hashem, but since it can be chizle biyas, that's not going to be a valid shina. That's why Gemara continues 5 lines down by the top of the Amid. Says Gemara, okay. But for Shin Hashem, she'ina chazl b'yasa. You're telling me because it's chazl b'yasa, it's going to go back, so it's not a valid Shin Hashem. But if it has a change of name, of title, that cannot be undone. Miyav Shin, is that a change in the essence of the thing that now you acquire because it's not anymore the victim's item? But Varei Tzinor, you have a pipe. The Meikara, where before you carve it out, it's called ketzitzta, which ketzitzta means to say a block of wood. And now when you carve it out, it's called not necessarily so much of a shina maisa, but it's more like a change of name. So if that's the case, we have the following difficulty, because we're trying to learn the brisa. If you have a pipe that was carved out, and at the end, it was attached to the ground, and you drew rainwater or water from the river to the mikveh. It says the brisa paisel as a mikveh. That invalidates the mikveh because of mayim shuvim, of drawn waters. It has to be naturally gathered waters. And here you went and did it through a vessel, which is what a pipe is. Which Taisa discusses. We're talking about, if it has borders on all 4 sides, and if it's missing one side or 2 sides, we could say exactly the parameters. But a vessel is a problem. Now, but what happens if first you put the block into the ground, and then you carved it out? That's not a vessel. That was considered part of the ground. So in the place is a mikvah. Now, such a pipe would not invalidate the mikvah. That's what the Brisa says. Says the Gemara, V'i Amr, but if you're going to say Shina Hashem Milsi, like Rav Yosef answered on the previous daf, that if it changes in its title, in its name, it's something significant, it changes the essence, then even if you first put the block into the ground and then you carved it out, it still changes its name. It's still now considered as a kli. So nami lipasul. So that should also invalidate the mikvah. Who cares that you put into the ground first? Says the Gemara, no, Ushani She'iva. This that a mikvah becomes possible with 3 lugin of drawn waters is different. Because in the Abanani, it's only a rabbinic halacha, and therefore we're lenient. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, so then it should even be valid if you carved it out and then attached to the ground, because now it's attached to the ground. So the Gemara says, no, Hasam over there, Ikateres Kliyala B'talish. It had the status of a vessel when it was already detached, so we view that as more of a kli. Here, it did not have a status of a vessel of it when it was detached. It was only after it's attached to the ground. So therefore, that's less like a kli, and therefore, since it's rabbinic halacha, we're going to be lenient in that case, and therefore, it doesn't refute this answer that Shin Hashem, that's not chayes l'biyasai, would be kaina. We continue to ask on Rav Yosef. Meisvei, the Gemara asks Rav Yosef in the following brisa. Brisa says, Haganev a thief, a gazan, a robber, va'anas, and a chamsin, who's someone that forcibly takes it, but he gives you money for it. When they steal your item, hekdesh and hekdesh. If he makes it hekdesh, it becomes hekdesh, and you can't have benefit from it. Utrumas and truma. If he takes it as truma, it's forbidden for a non-kohen. Umaschis and meiser, and if he takes it as meiser, it's meiser. So obviously, what you see from this brisa is that the gazlan is going to acquire this item simply by the owner giving up hope. So you see that Yush is kaina. That's the question on Rabbi Yosef. Some of they said, no. Hasam ikashin Hashem. It's not just Yush, because it sounds like just if he stole it, what happened? Nothing was done. So obviously it must have been because he gave up hope. It says, no, there this Shin Hashem. How so? To Mikara Tivla. Beforehand it was called untithed produce. Vashta Truma. Now the actual, we're saying when he makes a truma, it's truma. The act of making a truma changes the essence of the. It only works. Right, it's like boing ke'echad, right? It's like meaning when he does this, that itself is making it into. Right. The question is that itself able to activate that that making it when he does that is he's changing the name when he's actually making it into truma. So that itself is going to be a kinyan in Shina Hashem, meaning when you change the name, that itself you don't every time you say that, how does he have the ability to be? When you're doing a physical act, it's built into the building. It's called something else now. You're training it now that it's called something else. But it was only subsequent to your. You can only make it truma if you own it. I don't know. I'm saying if let's say hekdesh, he's saying if he makes it hekdesh, could he make it right? Right. When he builds it into the building, he doesn't own it. It's built in. Now it's built in. It's a different thing. So now he owns it. Right. But essentially, right. But it was in his property. Question is if he has the rights to do that. He did have it right. Elsewhere, the Gemara says that neither one can be makdish because he is not in his rishus and this is not his. What? And what is the answer? Simultaneous. Right. Yeah. But still, the chiddush has to come simultaneous because. Right. Oh, so then the lumdus in Yish and Shin Hashem, according to Rabbi Yosef, would be that really Yish gives you the ability to then, it's like Mustama Yish is misalik it from him, but it's not mine yet. And then I have the ability now to be makdish, to make episode Shin Hashem, and then with the Shin Hashem, I'm going to acquire it. So that's what he's saying, that before was Tevel, V'hashta Truma. Or let's say Hekdesh. Mikara Chulin, V'hashta Hekdesh. So in each one of these cases, Das Alein is the Shina Hashem, and that's what he's Mikaina. But you don't see, it's not going to refute Rabbi Yosef, you don't see Yush as Kaina. It has to be with a Shina Hashem. Now, going back to the discussion that we mentioned, it was important to have the context of what we're talking about. Really, that started us, what we were talking about with Yish, really started us off with Rabbah from the previous Daf about Shinui. And like we said, why are we discussing Shinui? Because of Rabbi Loi's halacha. What was Rabbi Loi's halacha? It says if it was Tleven Asa Ayil, and then if you were Tabach Hamacha, you're not going to be Chayim. That we're discussing because that's really the title of our parak of Merubah Dal Vahei, because we were saying that it's Shaloy Utavech, Shaloy Meicha. How is it yours? Because the Shinui that happened to it, that it changed into a ram because of its age, that is a Shinui that changes it. So that's where we're going back to this Amar of Chizram of Yenis, and he gives the source. From where do we know this halacha that when you change the item, that is an acquisition of the Ganav and the Gazlan, that he doesn't have to return the item? You could give the monetary value. It says in the pasuk, the Heshabas Exel says you should return what was robbed. What are you teaching with the words that was stolen? Obviously, you return what was stolen. Those are superfluous words. It's teaching us imke'ein shegazel yaksa. Asher gazel that was stolen, meaning if it's like it was when it was stolen, then you return it. If not, then dama ba'amba ba'yishlomi. You don't have to pay the monetary value. You don't have to actually give the thing itself. That is shinui kaina. It's not the same thing. You acquired what's called kinyane gezela. Says the Gemara, really? Hayasher gazel mebayi, that you need for something else. Lemute gezel aviv. That's coming to exclude when his father stole. That that he doesn't add on a fifth on what his father stole, which the Gemara later on of Kavdam and Beis and Perika Gozla explains that even if his father swears falsely, generally you have to add on a fifth. But the principle, of course, the pasuk, as the Gemara is going to say over there, you're liable for. But that's what Asher Gazal come and teach that you stole. He should return what he stole. What he stole, he pays the fifth. What his father stole, he doesn't. So says the Gemara, no, if that's the case, if that's all he was teaching, it should have said that he should return what he stole. So by default, that would exclude what his father stole. So then, Asher Gazal Lama Li Lamichtav, you still wouldn't have to say Asher Gazal. Instead of saying Heshav as a Gzela, say Heshav as Gzeloi, and that would tell us that only when he stole. So what's it saying Asher Gazal? Shemami the Tarta obviously is teaching me both halachas, is teaching me that he doesn't pay a chemesh on his father's, what his father stole, and also is that it's only Kain Shagazel. But if not, he's kind of with Kinyan Gzel. Now that's one version. Those is a different version. This is the exact opposite. He was teaching, how do you know that yish is that shinui, if you change, is not going to be an acquisition? Because Shnemitz in the pasuk as exelo mikol makim. This way, this version of Rav Chizda says it's Truma was stolen, whatever it stated it's in. I Gazel, which in the first version that said that he stole, meaning it's as it was as he stole. No, this version holds it's only teaching al Gazel Shalom only what he himself steals, he pays a fifth. He does not pay a fifth on what his father stole. So this version actually holds the exact opposite. Ula says, from where do we know that just the only giving up hope, that doesn't make that the Ganav is going to acquire it? Which the Rishonim discuss exactly what are we exactly talking about. There's this big thesis on the bottom, Rabbeinu Tam, making it sound like that really this halacha is not true. Really, Ula holds Yish is kaina. It's specifically as the context he's going to bring it for, which is for karbanis, because a mitzvah b'aveira. So although you're acquiring it, but it's not like an acquisition, because you're going to do a mitzvah carbon with aveira. Then the Re later on disagrees. He says no, it's not true. Ula always holds Yish like kaina. We find elsewhere that he holds that you are kaina is Yish Rishon Hashem. There's a big discussion exactly for the context for Ula's teaching, but upon him, he is saying this halacha. How do you know Yish, giving up hope, is not going to be a kinyan? Says Ula Shnemek, says a pasuk in Malachi. Says v'heveisim gazel, you're going to bring what's stolen, esa pesach, the lame animal, v'ezachayla, and the sick animal. These are inappropriate to be brought as kabbanas. Now, in the pasuk, we're comparing two different entities. Gazel, dimah de pesach, stolen, similar to the animal that's lame, which is teaching us mapisech leslie to count the cloud, just like the lame animal. There's no remedying this situation. It's lame animal. It's invalid. It's not something appropriate to be brought as a carbon. So it's continued base of gazel leslie to count. So it's teaching us that a stolen animal also has no remedy. What does that mean? No remedy. Loishno lefneiyish, loishno yachiyish. Doesn't make a difference if before the owner gave up hope, which obviously is not a good carbon. Doesn't make a difference if it's after the owner gave up hope. It's also not going to help. So you see that yish is like kaina. Again, is it in general or is it just for karbanas? But upon him, Ula tells us that yish is not going to be kaina. Rava Mahacha. Rava brings a different source. It says in the pasuk, karbanai, his carbon, which, what does that mean, karbanai, his carbon? V'loi hagazel, and not the stolen carbon. Now, Amos, he says, okay, that's obviously the drasha. But when is the pasuk telling us this exclusion? If it's before the owner gave up hope, shita. Obviously, it's the guy didn't give up hope. It's still his. Why would it even need a pasuk to tell me this? Rather, obviously, la'achar years must be after years. And again, this would also be again the context of karbanas. So it might be specifically, as it sounds like, for karbanas. That shemamina usually kanish shemamina. Obviously, you see that just if the owner gives up hope, that's not going to be a valid kinyan for the ganav. Says the Gemara, but Rava himself had said previously to answer for Rabba, if you recall from a previous daf, the Gazel carbon de Chavre. The Gemara had brought this. It's not the first time. This is on Samach Vav Mabeis. The Gemara had this discussion already regarding if Yish is kaina, meaning after we brought Rabbi Yisrael said Yish is not kaina, and Rabba said Yish is kaina, Rabbi Yisrael asked on Rabba. And And the Gemara had answered, and one of the questions Abai had asked on Rabbah was this pasuk Karban B'la Gazel, and he said obviously La'acha Yish, and you see Yish is not kind of like Rabbi Yosef. So Rava had answered. He said, "I have mishkavay v'leha Gazel." He brought like another halacha regarding the Tumas Mishkav. So he said, "No, it must be told about that you stole the bed of your friend." So Rava said, "Here also, you stole the carbon of your friend. You stole the carbon of your friend. There's nothing to do that it could even be talking about before years. And the chiddush you have to say that's not going to be valid. Two pshatim and Rashi, even for the owners, it's not going to work, even though there wasn't years. Or therefore, if you stole the carbon of your friend, even after years, it's not going to be cleaner because carbon doesn't get stolen wherever it's Hashem's. But the point the Gemara is trying to say is that was Rava. Rava was the one who actually resolved for Rabbah to say that this pasuk is actually not talking about stealing chulin and then saying, "Oh, is it before Yish, Achi Yish, and must be Achi Yish and Yish Yish Leikani?" But I mean, Rava himself had Rabbah is the one who says that Yish is kaina, and it says Karbana b'lahagazel. Why would it be lahagazel? Yish should be kaina. It says no, it's the one when you stole the friend's carbon. So if Rav himself is the one who fa'emfed and said that this pasuk is not a raya, how could he be the second source for the halachic idea, like Rabbi Yosef said, that Yish is not kaina, when he himself on the previous daf had showed us that this is not a raya because it's talking about stealing the actual carbon itself. So the Gemara says, if you want, you could say that he retracted, and therefore it's not a contradiction. It doesn't say which way it retracted, but he retracted. You could say that one of them actually was not Rava, was actually Rav Papa, which brings exactly why would we confuse the different Amiram, where he always said things in his name, Barak upon him. So it wouldn't be a contradiction because you're right, one of them is not him. Now the Mishnah had said, we said the one thing that was meruba, that kefil more than dal v'hei, is that kefil is by any type of item. As we brought all those drushes in the beginning of the parak regarding how we know the halachic source of kefil, both by ganim and toin tanzgam, it applies by all things, part of cloud, but dal v'hei is only by a shiur and a seh. Says the Gemara, Vamai. Why would you say this? Because that's all it says in the Torah, shiur and seh. If you recall from a previous daf, we had said many different contexts that talk about only a shiur, and we learned it out from the halachas of Shabbos, and that we had in the beginning of the parak, we had these many, and that's actually mentioned in our Mishnah. And just like over there is a wild animal, birds are all the same. Maybe here B'dal should also be the same. Why are you saying that Dalet V'hei is only going to be by a shiur specifically and a seh? So Rabbi says because Amakra, the pasuk says shiur v'seh shnei pamim. The pasuk says kignev ish shiur oiseh u'tvachim achare. Chamisha bakar yisham tachas ashar v'abatzan tachas aseh. It says it 2 times. Shiur v'seh in midachin eloi. Why do you have to repeat it? It could have said it. Could have said it 1 time. From the fact that you repeat it 2 times is telling me that must be it's dafka shiur and seh. Somebody said, "What are you talking about? Hai miyater. Which ones are the extra words?" As the Gemara goes through to explain. Sherba said the seifa miyater. If you're going to say that the word sherba said of the seifa is extra, meaning the Nichtav Rechman, the Torah should have written like this: Yignav shoyer oiseh. When someone steals an ox or a sheep, with tvachai, and the Gersa is really oimachara, and he slaughters it or he sells it. Chamisha baki shalom tachtav. It should have just said 5 cattle you should pay in place of it, and 4 sheep in place of it. Like Taisa says, that from logic I would have known that the 5 bakar is for the shiur, the 4 tzayin is for the seh. So why do you have to write the word shiur and seh in the end of the pasuk? Must be it's extra to tell me daf shiur and seh. So that's not true. Because of Rachman Hachi had the Torah written like that. I would have thought to say like this: Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg. I would have thought to say that you actually have to pay 9 times for each and every one, because I would have read that tachtav is the same tachta because it's singular in place of it. So I would have said 5 bakr in place of it and 4 sheep in place of it, which would have been a sum total of 9. Now, if you're going to say, how could you say that? Aksiv tachtav tachtav. It says the word tachtav 2 times, which that sounds like one is going on shur, one's going on seh. Because both of them are going on 1, so it should have said, hey bakr, v'dalet sign, yishalom tachtav. Why, if you're saying it 2 times, how could you say you would have thought to say that you have to pay 9 for each one? Says the Gemara, no, because chad tachtav miyater. Meaning, that's nothing, because you could say, you're right, 1 tachtav is superfluous, but that's not to say 1 shur and 1 neseh. That's necessary for a different drasha. And you could still say that 9 are talking about whether it be a shur or a seh. They sound like learn the brisa. The word tachtav is extra, but not to say it's going on the other one. It's to tell me a drasha. The brisa says yochel ganab shur shabamana. You would think to say, if you steal an ox worth 100 dinar, you would think yisham tachtav negidin, that you could pay in place of it these dying sheep. In other words, very weak and close to death. Because, okay, I'm giving a sheep in place of the one that I stole. Tamalama tachtav, and the extra word tachtav says, no, in place of it. It's got to be a mamala makim. It's got to be worthy of taking the place. So, but one thing is, I can't say that the words shar and seh of the seifa are extra, because it's not. If I didn't say shar v'seh, if I would have said tachtav, I would have thought to say, you got to give 9 for each one. Okay, you're right. So Ella, rather, shar v'seh dedeshim yuta. The words, when you mention them in the beginning of the pasuk, they're extra. Why? So the Gemara explains. The Nichtav Rachman, the Torah should have written, Ki yignav ish, when a man steals, u'tavachai, oy machare is the girsa, and he slaughters or he sells it. And don't say what. And end of the pasuk, Chamisha bakir sham tachas hashar v'abetzan tachas hashar. You got to give 5 cattle in place of the ox that was stolen, and 4 sheep in place of the sheep that was stolen. Great. I would now know that what was stolen was an ox or a sheep. And the pasuk at the end is telling me what to pay. Why do you have to say in the beginning of the pasuk that Ki yignav ish? Why do you have to say kignim is shar or said? Why do you have to mention for? Says it's not true. It's not extra there. Why? Because Rahman had the Torah written the way you just mentioned it. Having mean I would have said ad the gun of today betabachluhu until you steal 2 and you slaughter it. So because you didn't mention, you just said kignev ish if a man steals utvachai or macharai, and then it says you got to pay 5 for the cattle and 5 for the ox and 4 for the sheep. So I would have thought until you steal both and slaughter them. Says Gemara, what do you mean? It says you slaughter it, which is to 1. Says Gemara, yes, that's on the slaughtering. But since you didn't mention specifically ox or sheep, I would have thought until you steal both and sell them both. Says Gemara, no. By selling it also says in the singular, sell it. So I know it's only 1. Says Gemara, yeah, but okay, fine, you're right. Not regarding the slaughtering or the selling, because that it does say singular. I wouldn't think you have to do it on both. But say maybe I would have said ad the gonev today until you steal both, and then that, and then you slaughter one of them and you sell the other one of them. So that's why I had to say shar aseh the ratio to tell you that even though it's one of them that you stole, you're still going to be chayiv. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? You can't say that you have to steal both and that sell one and slaughter one, because it says oy macharer. It sounds like either slaughtering or selling, because oy is lachalik, it separates. So you can't say you would have thought you have to steal both and then slaughter one and sell one, even though it says that in the singular. It says okay, each one singularity in that, but you have to steal both of them. It says the Gemara, no, but still I would have said the gun of tarvayu until you steal both of them. Because that's really, if you didn't have the ratio of sharisah, the Sefer says, okay, 5 times in place of the ox, 4 in place of the sheep. So I would have said, yeah, meaning because you stole both, you didn't mention in the Mishnah one of one type and one of the other type. And then, and then if you slaughter one and you leave the other one over, and then you sell one and you leave the other one over, I mean like either or, because it says oy. So therefore I need to have in the ratio that you stole a shar or a seh to let you know that it's even if you steal only one of them. Because without that, I would have thought you have to steal both of them. And then Regarding the slaughtering and the selling, then it says oi. That could have been either or. But regarding the stealing, I would have thought you have to steal both of them. So that's not extra either. So you just showed me that the safe is not extra and the resh is not extra. So what are you saying that Sherbis said, Dafka, that we know the halach of Dal Behe is only Bashar and said because it says it 2 times, but they're not extra. Says the Gemara, Elashar the Seifa, the said the Reisha Miyater. You're right. One of them by the Reisha and one of them by the Seifa is extra, as the Gemara explains. Because the Nechid Rahman, the Keter could have written, Ki Yignev Ish Shar Utvach Machare, when the man steals an ox and he slaughters it and he sells it, Chamisha Bakar Yasham Tachtav, you have to pay 5 cattle in place of the ox that you stole. And 4 sheep if it was in place of a lamb. So that's, I could have written like that. I would have known all the different problems, the traps that you would have ran into. I know that you don't have to steal both of them because it says only one in the Reisha. And in the Seifa, it mentions exactly each one what you have to pay for, not all of them paying 9. So share the Seifa, but said the Reisha Lamali. Why does it have to say another time? You could have said Tachtav only on the Shar, and then by the Seh you would mention in the Seifa. Why do I need to say Shar in the Seifa and Seh in the Reisha? Those are the extra words, so it's matching it up, one from the Reisha, one from the Seifa of the Pasuk. Shar b'se'in midachin. Only an ox and a sheep, that's Rin Chayv Dal B'hei, but nothing else. Now the Mishnah continued and said, Ein hagoynev acha ganev misham tashlumi kefil. So then, once we finished saying meruba, so which we're obviously talking about the halachas of stealing, we said that if someone steals from someone who himself stole, he doesn't pay the tashlumin of kefil. Amar Ravi qualifies this halacha. Says lo yishanu elef nayish. Continue on these themes about the halacha of yish. We only said this only if it's before the owner gave up hope. But if the original owner gave up hope, so then, as we said, that the first ganav acquires it with the yish of the first original guy. Now it's his now. So now the second ganav has to pay kefil to the first ganav because he stole that guy's object. If it's before yish, it's not even his. So he wouldn't have to pay kefil in that situation. However, Rav Sheshes says, Amina I say kinayim b'shachav rab amal hashmaita, which this is mentioned a few times. We had it just recently, and when the Rav was dozing off and sleeping is when he said this teaching. It doesn't make sense. Ketanu lina brisa. Amr Bekiva says, Nema Amr Torah. Why does the Torah say tabach hamacher? What's the reason that when you slaughter or you sell a sheep or an ox that was stolen, masham tashlum bava kama, you have to pay 4 or 5 times the amount. Because you became rooted in sin, meaning you made roots. In other words, you became strengthened in the sin because when you slaughter and you sell it is when you acquire it, and your actions were effective. So therefore, we're going to hold you liable for 4 or 5 times the amount. So says the Gemara, Emas, when did he sell it? Ilem lifnei yish, if it's before the owner gave up hope, but to examine type of samachesem and aleph, mikin nishtarish, is he rooted in sin? But what I mean, his actions were not effective because the change of domain, that it changed from his possession to the possession of the buyer without yish, no one holds that you can be kaina. Without yish, nothing's going to happen. So why would he be chayav dal behav? You say the whole reason is because he's rooted in sin, because what he did is effective. But there's no kinyan that was done over here to say that anything was effective. Ella, rather, obviously, must be because la'achar yish. After the original owner gave up hope, now his actions are effective because now the buyer acquires it with 2 elements. One, that there's yish, and 2 is that there's shin rishus. Oh, so that's why you chayv dal mehei, because now you became the shtagesh bechet because you are hani maisav, that now the buyer acquires it? But if you think to say that yish itself is kani, acquires it for the thief, then why do you pay 4 or 5 times the amount when you sell it or slaughter it? But it's money itself that he owes to the owner. He's slaughtering or selling his own thing because he already acquired it beforehand. Why would you say his liability is because of what he's doing to the original owner as if because now is when the kinyan was a hani ma'asav that happened long ago when he got the yish. I mean, they said you're right. Kedama Rava. It's like Rava says later on the sugya. It's not because nishtara shachet. Nishtara she already had with the years. The reason why you have dal v'hei when you sell it or slaughter is nishashana b'chet. You repeated your sin because you first stole and now you double down and you sell it or slaughter it. It's because of you repeated the sin, but the truth is it's even before years, and even though it's not a hani ma'asav, it's not really affecting anything of kinyanim when he sells it or someone else who slaughters it, but it's because of repeating the sin, that's why he's going to be chayv. Thank you to any time. Close to us.